Well, thank you. Just first of all, I'd like to thank Mike and Bill and you, the church, for giving me this opportunity to come and speak to you today. It's something that I've been waiting a long time to do, and I'm kind of nervous, but it's going to be all right. So I want to talk to you today about a couple of biblical accounts that make up the story of a man in the Bible who is confronted by similar situations at two different points in his life. Now, you don't have to live in this world very long to know that we're going to be confronted many times, in many different ways, by many different things. And what I mean by confronted is there's going to be those times in our life when we are challenged, when we're challenged in our faith, challenged in our will, and challenged in our understanding of things. And as a Christian, it seems like those trials come even more often, and they're even more relentless. And it's the way that we respond to those challenges that says a lot about us. It can say a lot about our faith. It can say a lot about our strength and our courage. It can say a lot about our relationship with God. Now, these challenges that come, they take on many different shapes and forms. Some are one-time, life-changing events like the loss of a loved one or an illness. Some of these challenges are reoccurring. They keep happening over and over and over again. I can remember a time in my life when my wife and I were faced with financial difficulties due to our debt and bills. You know, bills come every month, whether you have the money to pay them or not. And for some people, that's a problem. And that was just last week. But I remember times when consequences of our past lives and our past sins come back to rear their ugly head and cause stress in our family and our marriage. And I remember times when our children, when they reached those blessed teenage years, they just absolutely lost their minds. Now, things like that happen, and those are everyday things in life, but those things challenge us. And sometimes they're hard to deal with, and sometimes we just don't know quite how to react. Sometimes we don't have the strength to just keep getting up every day and facing these challenges over and over and over again. I tell my wife, I say, sometimes it feels like the world just rises up and just sucker punches me. Just hits me with something that I don't expect, that I didn't see coming, and I don't always quite know how to deal with it. We hear about these things every week in this church when we do our joys and concerns. Every week, there's a whole new list of things that we need to pray for, things that are challenged the people in this congregation, things that the world is rising up and hitting us with, and that we need to find the strength to deal with. Now, I believe the Bible wholeheartedly. And the Bible is clear that whether we know God or not, we're going to struggle in this life. Those things are going to come, and they're going to challenge us. They're going to confront us. But the Bible also says that if we know Christ, our response to these challenges is supposed to be a little different. We're not supposed to worry about these things. We're not supposed to have stress. We're not supposed to have fear. In fact, the Bible says in many places that when those struggles come and those sufferings come, we're supposed to rejoice. We're supposed to be happy. We're supposed to count it as righteousness because we're suffering. Now, I read that, and maybe like some of you are thinking right now, that sounds like a good idea, but how in the world do we make that reality in our life? How in the world are we supposed to be happy when those hurtful things come? When those painful things come, like the Bible says? How do we do different? Because I know a lot of people that know Christ. They got Jesus t-shirts, they got Jesus bumper stickers. When their phone rings, it plays Jesus Take the Wheel. But every time something happens in life, well, we fall to pieces. We don't know how to deal with it. Don't know how to handle it. How do we change that? How do we break that cycle? Now, I believe that the Bible gives us an illustration of just this topic, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. The story of that man I was talking about is Peter, the Apostle Peter. Now, Peter, he's one of the most well-known characters in the Bible. There's lots of stories about him in the Gospels. We even have some of his letters that he wrote to the first century churches. We know a lot about Peter. And one thing we know about Peter is that Peter was a man of great faith. His faith was strong, okay? He was one of the first disciples chosen by Jesus. He was one of the first people to drop everything, drop his job, drop his family, drop everything that he knew in the world and follow Jesus. And that takes a lot of faith. When the disciples were in the boat out on the Sea of Galilee and the waters were raging and it was stormy and they saw Jesus out on the water walking, it was Peter that jumped out of the boat and went to Jesus. Now, he didn't make it very far, but he had the courage to step out of the boat. When the disciples were gathered and Jesus was asking them, "Who do the people say that I am?" And some of the disciples were saying, "They say that you're Elijah. They say that you're one of the prophets." And Jesus said, "Well, who do you say I am?" It was Peter that said, "You're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God." And Jesus said, "On this, I'm going to build my church." So Peter, his faith was strong. He loved Jesus. He believed in Jesus. He followed Jesus with his whole heart. But sadly, one of the most well-known stories of Peter in the Bible is a story when Peter's faith and his courage and his hope, they failed him. And this was a time that was probably Peter's greatest moment of weakness. And it happened on the night when Jesus was arrested. Jesus was taken into custody, and he was being taken to the house of the high priest to be put on trial. Now, when this happened, most of the disciples, they scattered. They ran. But Peter, he felt like he couldn't abandon Jesus, so he followed Jesus. He followed the guards all the way to the house of the high priest. And when they got into the courtyard, that's when it happened. The people in the courtyard, they had already seen Jesus being taken by the guards. They knew Jesus had been arrested. So then when Peter came following Jesus and the guards, somebody spotted him. And somebody said, "Hey, weren't you with Jesus?" Now Peter, this man of great faith, this man that said, "Jesus, I will never desert you," he had a moment of weakness, and his courage failed him. And he denied knowing Jesus. He said, "No, I haven't been with Jesus. You got the wrong guy." But then it happened again. Somebody else said, "Yeah, you're one of his disciples. I saw you with Jesus." He said, "No, you didn't see me with Jesus. You got the wrong man. I don't know him." And it happened a third time. "Yes, you were with Jesus. We saw you with Jesus. You've been with Jesus the whole time." And Peter said, now on this third accusation, some of the biblical accounts say that Peter started to call down curses on himself, and he started to swear. And I don't know exactly what that looked like in the first century, but the East Texas translation of that story meant Peter started cussing. Now, he was cussing mad, okay? I tell you, I don't know him. I'm not going to cuss, don't worry. So, but on that day, Peter did. He was cussing mad. He was so intent on convincing these people that he was not associated with Jesus that he was so angry. But the thing is, Peter wasn't really angry. He was afraid. He had fear in his heart, fear of what might happen to him if these people associated him with Jesus. That's what he was being confronted on, his association with Jesus, and he had to prove to these people that he wasn't. So he denied him 3 times. He lied. Now on that